welcome to the show. I'm delighted to finally have you here.
Me too, Alex. Really excited to sit down and talk with you.
Yeah, delighted. And, it's great to, we found you. I was doing a bit of homework on competitor podcasts. I wouldn't call them competitors, just other podcasts is probably a better way of putting it. And I saw your episode there and I knew you were a very unique sort of business and background. I was like, okay, definitely want to get you onto the pod here to share your sort of insights and ideas, philosophies, ideologies, whatever you want to call them. And like I always like to do at the beginning of every one of my episodes is have my guests introduce themselves. So I guess without further delay, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and most importantly, how you got to where you are today, Rob?
You bet, Alex. Rob Meng. I'm the CEO and founder of Faster Lines. We have been keeping track of people and cars in line for over 16 years now. And we do something slightly unique. We just keep track of delays. We want to identify anytime the line doesn't move to our client's time standard. And what that turns into is some interesting data that helps them manage their business better, give better customer satisfaction, and all of that turns into more revenue, which is a nice side effect. And I've got a great team in Lewisburg, North Carolina. We're around 10 people, and we execute for organizations all over the country. And we just started doing Canada and working on a project in the EU at this moment. So having fun all over the country and soon all over the world, helping people keep track of delays and move the line.
That's awesome. And I mean, when you say what the first thing that came to mind was not restaurant. Where do you think my mind went first when I thought of lines?
Probably the DMV. Everybody wants to talk about the DMV.
Oh, that DMV did come up in conversation with me today about how bad it is in Florida because I'm in Florida right now. But it was airport line.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Yeah. I'm like laughing in my head. That was like the first place that came to mind. But I guess it's such a truism of the experience. I mean, the experience of life is that lines exist and will forever exist. And some lines are better than others and some are not. And I guess, do you know what I mean? Like sometimes you're like, God, this line sucks. But when I think about it, okay, what was the genesis moment for you to realize that there was a business in trying to help businesses solve this?
Yeah. So it's so funny. My wife and I were sitting in line in a car wash, which was our first industry that we started serving, way back in the day. And we were just sitting in line and the line wasn't moving and she was getting frustrated. And it was our regular car wash and we already knew the manager. And she said, there should be a way to tell the manager that this is happening. Like, this is crazy. And I was like, yeah, there should be a way to do that. I don't think anybody does that today. And it was a long time ago. So compute was big and everything was big. And so we started off doing some investigation, figuring out what solutions would work. And we came up with vision systems. And 16 years later, we've got it down to about the size of a shoebox. And we put it at each location and a couple optical sensors and watch the line. And whether that's cars in line or it's people in line, it's all about what the goal is. Are we trying to serve 60 customers now? Or are we trying to serve 100 customers now? Or are we Chick-fil-A trying to serve 180 customers during their lunch hour? Like that. And so if you think about it, 180 customers during a lunch hour, that's moving a customer every 20 seconds. Nobody can sit in line and not move for more than 20 seconds to serve that many customers. And they're kind of the standard and everybody kind of drops down from there.
Do you know what it sounds like as another analogy? And I'm going to move away from airports. It reminds me, because you're talking about solving something from 20 seconds to 19 and a half seconds. It's like, I presume it's like shaving time off. Like it's very incremental. Like you're never going to move the line from 20 to 10 seconds in one.
Well, maybe.
If you could, yeah, I mean, it could be a great win, but more, I mean, I would imagine it's very designing the process to improve it, to make it consistently 19 and a half seconds, not 20 seconds.
Yeah.
It reminds me almost of the pit crew in Formula One, where the car comes in and it's like, boom, wheels off, new wheels on, and then the car's at the gap again. And it's trying to solve for that level of efficiency. It is kind of unbelievable. Tell me, when you're because I mean, you consult across a range of like industries as well, presumably not just like restaurants, or is it just restaurant specific as well?
So we do car wash, oil change, small box retail. All of those have either lines of people or lines of cars that are waiting to interact to have the next customer be served.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, Rob. Did you see that there? That just dropped. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear?
Yeah, I got you again. Yeah, you were fine,
Okay.
and then all of a sudden it just
After,
quick drop. Yep.
yeah, I'm gonna make a note here. Make a drop off. I just anytime that ever happens, I just make a note to say drop off 520, 520 to say 6 minutes. Okay. Basically, what we're saying there was yeah industry specific. So I'm just gonna ask that question again.
Yep.
So Rob, is that like industry specific, in terms of like, are you focusing just on restaurants, or how applicable is this to like other industries as well?
You bet. So we started with car wash and cars in line waiting for car washes. Then we identified that we could do the same thing in drive-through. It was exactly identical. Since then, we adapted the solution to keep track of people in line before the register, and found that was very similar. It's amazing how universal just standing in line or sitting in line in your car is. And now we serve auto service industry like oil change, quick serve lube, where we keep track of their wait time before they get into their bays. So yeah, restaurant through the auto industry, pretty much anybody who's waiting in line to be served.
Yeah, no, it's very fascinating, and I guess you were talking about the technology you use for those that are listening, not like watching. That you're like showing that like almost like it's like the size of like a mobile phone, like the screen itself. I'm like holding like an iPhone here in my hands, like you're kind of holding it like that, like sideways camera. Like that piece of tech you've iterated on over and over and over again. Like for like a research analysis that you would do with say like let's just go back to the Chick-fil-A example. You would just park this at what, the register? And how long would you leave it for? Like how long does it take to gather insights? Like how does it feedback? How do you analyze? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so we actually install. It's about a shoebox. It's actually about the size of a shoebox. It goes in the manager's office. Then we run one cable to an optical sensor that's about the size of my thumb, and then we point that at the register and check the line of customers that are waiting before the register. Our install takes about 2 hours, and we're collecting data. And usually within the first 3 weeks, we have some pretty interesting insights. We've already worked with the client and talked to them about what their expectations are. And then we go and we look and see, do we match with expectations? So they say we're serving 100 customers an hour. Are we? Are we serving 60? Are we serving 80? And how often are we having delays versus what their stated time standard is? And that's the first chance that the customer, within about 2 to 3 weeks, we meet with them and go over the initial data set. And that's when they start to have some aha moments like, oh, we have 30 alerts for every 100 customers that we serve. And we're not on our time standard. And why? And, we're just not opening the second register on time. Or, I've got a really good buddy, Ben, who's a Zaxby's franchisee in the Raleigh area. And we identified for them within 3 days that they were transitioning from traditional order speaker box for their drive-through to line busting, but they were doing it at 11:30, and they were already busy at 11:30, and they were shutting their line down for 15 minutes to do this transition to line busting. And it was in the middle of 50, 60 customers waiting in line, and it was crazy. So we can find things pretty quick. Usually within a day or two, there's something that makes sense.
That's awesome. And so you have the data tool itself. Is that a self-serve tool that they have, or as well, like something like Chick-fil-A could just always have that? Or is it like a research tool? Or do you sell your services as a consulting plus data capture service?
Yeah, we do a complete white glove. So we do data as a service. So the device we install, the kit we install, we collect the data, and then we deliver it to the customer, the client, the way they need it. And we've been doing that for a long time now. And the main reason is I had a history in IT, and I just know IT teams don't have time for ad hoc projects, and ops teams are busy serving customers. They don't have time for projects. And so why don't we just come in, install it, get it going, collect the data, and then show them what's happening? And so we just do it all for the customer. We do it for about $7 a day, and we turn around an ROI immediately when we start to identify delays and help them solve those delays.
That's awesome. And I love that you mentioned that, because I feel like it's like, boom, let's talk brass tacks, ROI. You know what I mean? It's like these people, as if it's like these people, like the buyer of the service. I mean, what I find when I buy software or SaaS, I never get pitched the ROI. I get pitched like, oh, this will help you do X, Y, Z. But I'm like, no. If I'm going to spend X $1,000 on this service, I want to know the material impact I'm going to get from it. And you're able to speak to the revenue opportunity, the ROI opportunity, more or less from the get-go. Like, for say like a Zaxby's, for example, it's interesting because obviously there's 600 and something locations for Zaxby's. Many franchise owned. Are they all franchise? They're all franchises, I
think. Actually, they have some corporate. They have about 100 corporate stores. They have about 900 locations now. So they've got a ton of locations all over the Southeast. Yeah. And when we started working with one of their franchisees in the Atlanta market, we identified, again, within a week, two really interesting things. We saw that their Sundays were crazy busy and that they were understaffed on their Sundays. So they didn't have the same team on Sunday that they would have like on Saturday, but they had the same number of customers. And so they made those adjustments really quickly, added the staff in like they would on a Saturday. Yep. And their revenue shot up 20%, like just like that. Like that was an amazing quick hit. And then we also, yeah, go ahead, Alex. Yeah.
No, what I was going to say was, I guess my question to you would be like, something like Zaxby's, like 900 locations or whatever. I mean, huge. And like 800 of those say franchise owned, okay? Which is a huge opportunity for you, obviously. It's awesome. Word of mouth's amazing. But if you think about it, okay, how in God's name did they miss that? If I think about that on a practical level, from a cash register perspective.
Yeah.
And it's like, I guess what I'm getting at is like the quantitative element of the cash register doesn't lie. Like sales come in, food goes out, money comes in, food goes out, but they're not able to see the wood from the trees in the
water. Well, they can only see what they did, right?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. They can only see what they did. That's what I was going to say.
They can just see how they executed that day or that hour. They can only see what actually happened. They can't see the opportunity. They can't see all those extra customers in line. They can't see that there was a wait or a delay. Zaxby's for years has been trying to use magnetic loops, and that's the traditional model that we compete against is this magnetic loop technology. And there's so many challenges with it that teams quit looking at it. So it ends up being dead data. It ends up being just completely ignored. Whereas when we start collecting this delay metric and we tell people, hey, there was this many delays in this hour, or there's been 5 delays in the last 15 minutes, go do something about it. Be like, if you're a manager and you get that text message or that email, you can actually jump in the line and go figure out what's going on and fix it. So there's some real-time aspect to it where you can really change the trajectory of a good bad hour. But the biggest thing that we do is we help them identify these hours that they just don't know could be spectacular. Like we found on Wednesdays at 3:00 at so many of our customers so far, we found Wednesdays at 3:00, you have parents that are picking up their kids from school. They're on their way home and they're stopping and they're getting chicken, or they're stopping and getting their car washed, or they're stopping and doing this. And it's this unexpected time. And almost for every client we've served, it's right between shift changes. It's right between their lunch team and their dinner team. And they end up getting destroyed. Well, you don't want to tick off soccer moms. You don't want to tick off any mom. Like you don't want to tick off these people who have their kids in the minivan or they're suburban and you want to make sure that you're absolutely serving those guys just like you would your busy lunch or dinner rush. And so over and over again, we found little things like that are huge impact points that we can, and it's not about whipping the team or getting the team to do more, right? Like like Ben from Zaxby's would tell you, like his team's working 110% all the time, and they can't give any more than they already are. It's about finding those opportunities where you can invest and add more people to the team so that you can serve those additional customers. And that's the fun part.
You mentioned like delays, as like it's a thing. So as a metric you measure, like there are like delays. Like what are like the typical delays that you kind of see? Like there has to be some very obvious ones that like, when they see them, they're like, oh my God. Like I'm sure when people review, there's all these kind of like hands and face kind of, oh my God, like like cringy kind of moments for people. What are the kind of delays that you kind of typically see?
The easiest one, and the one that happens for everybody when we start measuring a line of people, is they just don't open a second register. Like almost every client that we serve has 2 registers or 3, and they'll get stuck with just one, and the manager won't know that they're getting busy out in the dining room, and they just won't open the extra register. And if they would, they double revenue instantly. And that's true. We also do C stores. We have a partner up in Connecticut where we're helping them with their C stores, and same thing. They've got 1 register open. They need 2. And as soon as they open up that second register, the floodgates open and they just serve twice as many customers.
Can I stop you and ask you, what is a C store? Just so I understand.
Oh, yeah, no problem. So it's a convenience store. So you think of 7-Eleven.
Oh, convenience store.
Yeah. And so we have a customer up in Connecticut that has car wash, oil change, emissions, and convenience store all on the same property. And so we help them measure all those different lines and tell them when there's delays.
You know what's interesting? You mentioned, okay, so like the registers is like the first place, and it's like, of course, open a second one. And presumably there's a lot riding on the GM in the restaurant, for example. I know we're talking a lot about restaurants, and I know oil changes and car washes are your thing.
Oh yeah, restaurants are.
Forgive me, that restaurants are really my thing. So
no, we're all about
it. But like, there's a lot of pressure on the GM to action this kind of data as well. So you need to A, be very close to the GM, or be very kind of deliberate with the information that they need to synthesize in such a quick amount of time that they know to action from you. So how do you, that's such a wordy way of phrasing, how do you get the insight into the GM's hand as fast as possible so that they know, like an accordion, they can open it and close it, open it when it comes to, like, say, the register, for example?
100%. Yeah, great question, Alex. So first of all, we figure out what's the best way to communicate with them. We have purpose-built devices like a tablet or a screen. It might just be a quick text message to their phone, but however we should do it, whatever's the easiest for them to get that data set, we tell them in 15 to 20 minute increments. Yeah. So we don't tell them about every time there's a delay. We tell them when there's a bunch of delays or delays are trending so that they can go look and do something about it. Because maybe they're doing scheduling in their office. Maybe they're back in the icebox, identifying that they need to get more lettuce or whatever it is. Like they get their eyes get pulled, their mind gets pulled away from the line and from executing on customers. And we just give them a ping to remind them, hey, there's a line and it's not moving. Go find out why. So it's really that simple. And most of the time that GM jumps in and maybe they're the one who opens the second register and runs it for 15 minutes until they grab somebody else. Or maybe there's an issue at the fries. They need to open up a second fryer and start executing on the actual physical line. But the GMs, as soon as you ping them, as soon as you wake them up to the fact that there's an issue, they jump in and execute, and it makes a huge difference.
Totally. And I mean, that's the thing. It's like creating a digestible way for them to action in the communication as fast as possible. I think like one of the things I hear a lot is like, especially on the podcast, is like empowering the GM to like, what's the phrase? Like ask for, like, don't ask permission, ask for forgiveness kind of vibe. It's like, just go be the entrepreneur we need you to be to make things happen. I think like thinking quick on your feet is one thing. Being able to think quick on your feet backed by data in the same time is just next level, kind of almost like a martial art as applied to like GM.
Yeah, I love that.
You can have it. But it's like, when it comes to like, I think a lot about this because the GM is like the heart. I don't say the heart and soul because everybody's the heart and soul of the restaurant if they're positive, you know what I mean? But I think in terms of like what makes or what separates good from bad in terms of a lot of these sort of restaurants is like having a very strong-minded, strong-willed entrepreneurial GM. And like, you know, I think a lot about like sort of the complexity of the role that they've been given,
Oh,
because
yeah.
especially since COVID, it's just like, I don't want to say night and day different, but it certainly evolved or like mutated into a job so much more than simply hospitality. You
Yeah,
know,
well, they're running the whole thing. Like it's
yeah,
all them, and it's like you said, like their kung fu needs to be strong, man. Like they have to see, and that's what the whole solution was from the beginning. Like my wife sitting there in line saying there should be a way to tell the manager that this is happening, because good managers, as soon as they know, they want to go do something about it. They want their customers to have that great quality experience. They want them to be happy. They want to put the right team in place. They want to get everything dialed in, and we give them that data, and then that next step is really giving them the data, like you were saying, over time. Yeah, right now, but also, oh, this is happening every Thursday or every Sunday or every week or every month, and it's happening not just at our location; it's happening at this district or through the entire company. Let's give them that information so that they can build the case to say, we need one more person. We got to open that extra register. We got to prep a little bit earlier. We got to extend our team so that they stay until 2 or 3 o'clock, because we get that extra rush after lunch. Or what's lunch anymore? Like, what is lunch anymore? Like, so who can even know? Like, when does dinner start? When does it end? And so we can really start to tap into when there is a line and when they need to be serving. And it's not always the traditional schedule anymore. And so we can help them with that data.
that's kind of amazing. And I'm kind of like, first of all, just the meta concept that lunch, what is lunch anymore? It's like, yeah,
Yeah,
I had lunch at 11:30 today. Like
right.
I was like, I knew I'd have meetings until like 4, so I was like, I guess I'm gonna have to go have an early lunch, brunch basically for myself. But it's it's true. I mean, especially with the advent of like digital ordering, so pickup, curbside have added a type of complexity to managing the line, because obviously there's a focus on redesigning the four walls to take space from line and sitting and apply it to curbside prep areas, all that kind of stuff. So there's less space for lines in the first instance, you know. And then you have just like making sure the food's ready for when somebody comes in, that there's not a line for them to wait for the food for them to come pick and collect. And then you also have like, say, certain extremely large brands have like their digital kiosks now,
Yep.
and you go in, people are not sure how to even use them, and so you have people standing around. And so the role of the host, or the role of what was the cashier. So I guess, I'm just thinking out loud here, but like, you have a lot of insight into this. Like, what is the role, like, if the line is managed by effectively cashiers, because
Yep.
they're the ones putting the orders through, and we're moving into an era, in particular in QSR, of almost like cashier less,
Mhm.
like kind of, and it's like to have this sort of digital sort of kiosk experience. What is the future of the line within the four walls of the restaurant? I'm just curious
Yeah.
your take.
Well, first of all, it needs to still be a line. Like there's people who are like trying to put kiosks,
Americans love a line.
right? No, they do. And I am talking specifically about the US, because I know that doesn't necessarily apply Southeast Asian and stuff like that. But in the US, you can't just have a circle table with kiosks all around it and then just say go for it. Like it freaks people out. We have this concept of justice like built into us of who should be next, and if I think I'm supposed to be
Justice.
right, and if I think I'm supposed to be next and I don't get to be next, I am an upset customer. My NPS scores are going down. So you got to make sure that you're feeding these systems still with lines that people can see and that they can go execute, so that they're not confused. Because you don't want any friction, right? You don't want anything
Yeah.
that's going to slow them down or make them feel uncomfortable. You want them to feel really guided through the process one way or another. And that's the most important. And then sometimes there should be register, because your customers need that extra interaction. They need to know. And so maybe a kiosk next to an open register, or 2 kiosks in a register, but you still want that opportunity for the customer experience. You still want that opportunity for the liaison for the company to be able to talk to them about any questions they have about their order and things like that. And that's really the critical point, is still that opportunity for good customer service, good interaction that's going to make them feel warm and fuzzy and want to come back more often.
Well, totally. I think the role of the cashier is to be more of a host, to guide people through the process, especially as we go through this sort of learning curve of expecting to use digital kiosks. I mean, in the way that like you showed your parents how to use an iPhone when they got it, and now they know how to use it. It's like, okay, like we're moving into that era of like technology, I guess. A fun question I have for you, and I was curious your take on this, because in the restaurant space, but not outside the four walls, though, which is drive-throughs exploding in America again. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's like super hot, great margin if you can pull it off. I mean, have you done any sort of drive-through projects at all, or like, is that part of like, because that is technically a line. So I'm curious, like I would imagine optimizing the drive-through is even more of a pain than solving humans inside of a restaurant. You know what I
mean? The drive-through it's such a known entity. We're talking to a lot of restaurateurs right now who are transitioning. Specifically during COVID, they picked up more curbside. They started getting third-party orders. They were still having people come in and interact, and now they're starting to add some specific pickup windows that are kind of a transitioned drive-through, right? Not totally drive-through. Yeah, exactly. The order's already placed and you're ready to pick up, and it should be easy. And whether that's a customer that I ordered or it's third-party, and one of the pickup folks is coming by to pick it up, let's make it easy for them. So those are all things that we are working with. And just as critical that you process them and that they're ready to go and that they're not having to wait and that it makes sense. And so that's all really good data. But yeah, it's everybody is looking at ways to transition customers, not have them have to get out of the car in order to serve them better. And we can see all of that. And then we get into some cool stuff like the line busting, like, Chick-fil-A does it. I talk about Chick-fil-A because they do it better. Not all their locations, but a lot of their locations do it better than anybody else. And you can mess up.
Can I pause you there for a second? I want to interrupt you for a second. Define line busting before you explain.
Line busting. So tablets so instead of just having a speaker that the car pulls up to and places their order and the menu's right there, you end up having a tablet and your team is going back in the line with cars so that you can get further away from the building. I'll tell you, there's a lot of challenges there. I mean, there's no menu. So we have seen in almost every experience that we measure line busting, you go from maybe 30 seconds per order at the speaker box to more than a minute per order with the tablet, because there's so much more interaction with the employee and asking about specials or asking what are my sauces or what are my drink choices. When you pull up and the menu board's right there, you see all that. It's all instantaneous. And
I have to say, I thought that was amazing. I've actually been in a line busting experience in halfway between San Francisco and Lake Tahoe. And there's like the last Chick-fil-A, there's like one Chick-fil-A on the whole way. So everyone pulls off the freeway, and that line, man, like it's in a car park, it's in a strip mall kind of thing. Yep. So like the cars are looping around and it's a zigzag of a thing. And you're like, I'm never going to get my food. But you got all the kids who are, they're all kids. They're all like 16 to 20 years old with the things wrapped around their arms, the iPads, and they're like,
ready to go. That's right.
You're like, well, this is amazing. Eventually you'll get there, you know?
And with Chick-fil-A, you don't mind getting in a line with 50 other cars because, they're going to serve 180 cars in an hour. And so your car's going to keep moving. You're never going to sit there, and it's great. Their menu is also optimal for that kind of ordering because they don't have a big menu, so there's not a lot of conversation there. But you pull up to some of these places and they have 3 boards for their menu, right? 3 full boards. That's really difficult to communicate, with a tablet standing there. You don't want your employees to have to walk around in sandwich boards like that, old school, like a cartoon, like, oh, look, our menu's on my chest, like that.
Yeah.
So it becomes really challenging. And we had a customer that we were measuring. They were they didn't talk about their procedures with their employees. And so they ended up having these tablets 30 cars back. They're almost off of their property that they're taking orders. That's too far back. Like that doesn't work because then you're getting the order to the kitchen too early.
By the time they come around.
By the time they get around, their chicken, your chicken's not crispy or your milkshake's melted. So there's just lots of things that you have to think about as you go through that process. And it's fun to measure. It's really cool to see. We had another customer in California that was Mexican, quick Mexican food. And they were so worried about line busting. They were so worried about getting the tablets out. And then you found out, no, it's their kitchen. Their kitchen was so slow. They had times where cars would sit for 5 minutes and not move. It had nothing to do about getting the order into the kitchen. Your kitchen still has to execute. And so you got to figure out, again, Ben said it great from Zaxby's. You don't want to play whack-a-mole. You don't want to play whack-a-mole. You don't want to be hitting this and it pops up over there. You need data so that you can make some of these decisions and know where the problem is. And we do a pretty good job of that. We can tell you, is there an issue at the window where the kitchen's not executing? Is there an issue getting the order into the kitchen? And really pinpointing it. A lot of people are talking about drive-through and they talk about how the dining room is dead. Every time we measure dining room, there's a ton of people there. There's people that want to be served.
Yeah.
And so how often are we upsetting them by not having enough registers and not serving them well enough in the dining room that they're like, well, I guess next time I'll just stay in the car and go through the drive-through.
Well, I think that's exactly it, Rob. Like I've had people on this podcast talk about that experience. I had the president of East Coast Subs on the pod, and he was talking about like, okay, we were in a third-party brand before COVID, but COVID forced our hand, and it's like, how do we think about our store experience now? If people want to get these delivered, how do we make the store experience so much better?
Yeah.
That like when you come in and you get that sub, that there's fumes coming out of it. And he was very like animated, like the fumes. And I was like, you've nailed the point here, because I think like third party, my take on third party is, first of all, I think it's amazing. The fact that I can order any restaurant food I want to my house, first and foremost, the dream. You know what I mean? Like, as in 10 years ago, if you said that, it's a ridiculous thing. You only get pizza and delivery. Now it's like anything's fair game. Problem is, everyone's blameless now, in the sense that, like, by the time the food gets to you, the chain of command is such that you're not going to blame the restaurant because you're like, it was Uber or it was DoorDash. That's why my food is now mushy. But then you're not going to blame the driver or the biker, because you're aware of their circumstances and why they're doing it, and you're like, they get paid for nothing. So it's like, like, I'm not going to blame this guy. And then you're not really going to blame DoorDash or Uber Eats because you're like, God, it's a computer. It's just going to reply to me and they're going to give me $2 off on a credit. So it's like a blameless kind of circle. But what we've accepted is a kind of lower quality across the board in terms of the food. Now, I do want to stress that, like, that's not exactly true. I mean, some products have always traveled well, like pizza boxes, and that's how pizza travels well. And every other type of food is catching up to figure out, how do you deliver your crispy shrimp? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is that
or French fries, and not have to grab your air fryer and throw it in there again. Like
exactly. And I think, and that just implies that, like, we're at a pendulum. Like the guest experience in the restaurant is kind of going through a pendulum where, it was taken for granted. I don't want to say taken for granted, but it was certainly the norm up to COVID. COVID absolutely changed how America eats food. Like, I mean, I don't know, as dramatic as that sounds, I think
it's true.
Fundamentally, like, our diets have changed, and I guess now we play pickleball and we have Ozempic. You know what I mean? It's like smaller tennis courts. But you know what I mean? It's like the way Americans do things is like different fundamentally than it was before COVID. And with that is like the restaurant experience too. And so, but what I think and what I feel, I had an amazing guy on this podcast, JW, Jonathan Wetherington, who's the CEO of Shucking Shack Oysters. They're in your neck of the woods. They're down in South Carolina. They're in the Carolinas, at least anyway, in case I get that wrong. Definitely Myrtle Beach, which I know is in the set.
Yeah.
And he was saying to me that they've completely eschewed digital, like third party. And he was like, people are coming to this restaurant for the vibe. Like, as in the atmosphere, the food, the beers, the people. It's like, that cannot be translated or parlayed into like third party, for example, or into delivery. It's like, like they're like willing to sacrifice whatever margin that they would get from that just because they believe the experience of their restaurant is so elevated that this is what you're buying. You're not just buying the burger, or you're not just buying, in their case, obviously the oysters or whichever. You're buying the vibe that comes with them and the experience, which I think will lead more people back in. But I think relating to you, it's going to change how people experience the four walls themselves within the business.
Well, totally, Alex. And you mentioned East Coast subs, and there's a couple other great sub companies that are out there doing great work. But if you're a customer, you experience it, right? Like if I walk in and I'm going to get my sub and I'm going to have them or make it right there in front of me, and I have to wait 10 minutes for them to finish online orders, that doesn't work, right? I know it's not fair. I'm sure the online order came in before I did. It doesn't matter. I'm at the store. I want to be served. I want to be taken care of. And so that's one of those inflection points where if you're not measuring, your team may think that they're doing the right thing, but you can't upset those customers that are in your store. They're the ones who are your bread and butter, who are going to come back over and over and over again. And then at the same time, you also can't ignore the orders. So you got to do both. And if you don't have the data to know when you got to go invest in the man hours and go get the right employees so that you can go execute on that, you're flying blind, and it's really difficult.
And that's exactly what I was going to ask you. It's like, how difficult has it been for you in like sort of your business, so to speak? Not difficult like personally. I mean like the challenge, the intellectual challenge of solving. We've got the line in the store, and the store is retroing itself to like prioritize online too with the in-store staff. And you've got a sort of invisible line that exists for the in-store customer when they come in and you see it in like all your kind of large the kind of fast casuals. Like the fast casuals is probably a very good example of this, where you walk into your Just Salads, your Cavas, your Sweetgreens, or whichever, like they have the gigantic docking stations effectively for all the DoorDash drivers to come in, and there's whole staff working on those. And they, in fairness, like they have very fast lines. But I would imagine when you're consulting with clients as well, that this is a very difficult sort of challenge to overcome, this sort of invisible line, this invisible weight that potentially people can face when they go into the store.
Well, and it's impossible to solve if you don't know it. Like you got to have data, right? Like, and that's been the biggest challenge for so many organizations. You can measure your third party. You can really more easily measure your drive-through. How do you measure the people in line? How do you know when you have this demand that's pent up in your dining room? And those customers are the ones who are going to get offended. They're the ones who are here to be served. And there better be a way to measure that demand. And we can do it. But if it's not us, you got to find something that's going to show you when those people are standing in line. You mentioned Cava. I was at Cava the other day. Fantastic organization, great food. They had two people working the kitchen. You could see them building the third-party orders.
Yeah.
They only had one person working the orders in the front where they're building the bowls, and then they had a great person working the register. The person working the register was very timely and working great, but that one person building the bowls, they could only bounce back and forth. They needed a second one. If they had a second one, they would have doubled their revenue that hour. And they were also training their customers. It's all about brand trust, right? They're training their customers. Do I have time to go to Cava for lunch today? Because, right? And that's so important. Like you got to get that. You got to know.
And like, I guess like how I'm just trying to like figure out like what is the question I'm trying to ask you on top of that, which is like, I guess in a technical perspective. Here's a question for you. I'm going to edit that part out, by the way.
That's okay.
That was like a brain fart.
I love it. Sorry about it.
I was like, like one of the things I've heard. Actually, I'm going to need to like write this second down because I'll forget it, and then I'm doomed to have this actually in the episode. So, 39 mins to 39.50. Okay. If I don't forget the question.
I love it.
40. Yeah, I know this is it's a long day. Okay, here we go. So, and like one of the things, and I hear this a lot from people at the moment, is designing their CDPs, their customer data platforms, and building out sort of in-house data infrastructure programs, because lots of the third-party vendors, or your blocks or your whichever is like Clovers and all these things, are very kind of closed ecosystems with their data, and they're not great at sharing, open APIs and stuff. With yours, for example, like, were I a restaurant owner and I had my own CDP, would I be able to like take in this sort of real-time data and plug it in?
100%.
Yeah,
100%. We just give it to you, and we're all about that. We manage it for some of our clients because they don't have a data lake or they don't have a CDP strategy. But as soon as our customers want that data, as soon as our clients want to grab that data, we're ready to give it to them real time, like as it's happening. And so we can do dual stream. We can be helping them look at the data and analyze it, but we can also be feeding it directly into their systems, into their point of sale, into their APIs, wherever they want it to live. And we've been doing that for years now. We believe the data is their data, because it's their data. And so we got to give it to them where they want it. And that's what we're all about.
that's awesome. And because I had a very interesting pod with somebody down your neck of the woods as well. And I will absolutely introduce you to this person, but I haven't released the podcast. I don't want to necessarily speak too much to what it is, but basically these guys are a very large sort of like a deli group down your neck of the woods, like Carolina way. And our entire conversation was about the what and whys of APIs. That's the only way I can think about saying it right now.
Yeah.
In the sense that, like, very much from the ground up, building up their own loyalty program, building out like their sort of email infrastructure, very much plug and play, not being kind of tied to Salesforce as your CDP, or you're tied to Salesforce as like your entire stack. You know what I mean? Very modular. And I think about your product a lot. I was just thinking about it as we were chatting. I was like, what an amazing piece of data to have within your restaurant, and to have within your restaurant stack that can like serve so many functions. From a marketing perspective, like real-time marketing is like, oh, there's an enormous, like there's demand in the store. How do I market, like, say, who's in the area here, whichever, you can send them a type of message, double down on that demand. How do I ping my staffing to like, hey, we need more bodies in the business today. We're feeling like we need more. The access to that kind of data, to be able to use it for so many different things creatively within your business, is such an unlock. I actually think it's really cool. Like, in my head, I'm like kind of thinking about all the things that you could do with that kind of data to really like benefit your business. And I'm sure you're like, Alex, let's take this offline and let's actually have a brainstorm of like how we can do more ideas for like.
No, I love it. It's so true, and it's really interesting. It's so hard. We were talking about GMs, but it's same thing now for anybody who's managing multiple locations. It's how do we contextualize the data, right? How do you make the most sense out of the different data points? Because there's 1,000 data points coming in, but you have to figure out what are those key data points that are pushing you to the most knowledge, so that you can execute the best for not just your customers, also your employees, right? Like we talked about a couple of times, like the scheduling thing. I was at a small burger slider company that's a very famous slider company, and it was in Middle America, and I was there on personal travel, and I was there, and they were getting destroyed. They had a cinnamon roll. They had the entire building was surrounded by cars. Their drive-through wasn't moving, and inside they had like 3 birthdays going on and 12 people lined up waiting for their food. And these employees were back there, and you could see only one of their 3 fryers, one of their 3, hot stands was open, and they either just didn't know they were going to get destroyed like this that day, or you can't leave people like that. Like, these people were getting abused, and they'll deal with it, right?
That's exactly it then. And I mean, it's also like a mark of respect for the staff, because everyone knows that, like, who are the people that are going to be taking it on the nose. It's the frontline staff, and they're just teenagers, or they're youngish, you know what I mean? And like, these people are just trying to earn a living, and when people are hungry, they are hungry.
That's right. They'll deal with it once or twice, right? They'll do with it. But if you give them that situation week after week after week, you're just turning over staff. You're just going through the motions, and it's you can't go through that forever. Like, it's too painful.
What is the see, can you believe we've been talking for 45 minutes, by the way?
Yeah, I could talk all day like this, Alex.
I guess, like kind of like summing it up, like the people who listen to this pod are typically like executives in hospitality, owner operators, HR culture, which I guess is technically not really your wheelhouse, but like the operations and the owner operators.
Yeah, it's all the same.
Yeah. Tell me, like, what advice would you give to them? What final advice, listening here to you talk about lines?
You got to figure out your data sets. You've got to, we were talking about CDP. You got to figure out how you're knowing what you don't know. Point of sale is only going to echo what you already know. Your data sets today are probably only going to tell you what you did. They're not going to tell you what you could have done and how many customers left the line, how many customers just sat there for too long and couldn't handle it anymore. And so how are you getting that data set of what the opportunity was so that you can correct your processes, correct your schedule, and invest in the opportunity? You have stores all over the place that have more people that want to be served than are being served. And so how do you learn that and how do you execute on it? And we'd love to help you, but if it's not us, find a data set that's going to help you understand where that opportunity cost is hitting you.
Rob, you're a legend. That's so insightful. That's going to be the clip, by the way. For anybody here, that's definitely going to be one of the clips. I'm like, boom, that's hot. That's hot. Rob, let me tell you, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the pod here. I have to say,
Alex, it was wonderful. I can't wait to have the next conversation with you. This was great. And I appreciate your time and everybody who's listening.
You're a gent. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man.